you haven't met Ash and Divya, they are two of our team from the Power Platform side of the business, and they're amazing. And they're going to teach us some tricks. Take it away, guys.
Cool. Right. Welcome. So this webinar is about building a flow anyone can manage. This is personally something that I have had before, where I have opened a flow that I built probably 5 years ago, and I've thought, what the was I thinking? Obviously, so since I started, we've learned a lot of things along the way, and these are things that we use in our team every day to make it easier to manage our flows. So during this webinar, we're going to go through why it matters, a quick intro as to why it matters. Then I'm going to kick off with a basic approval flow. And then Divya is going to jump in and does what she normally does and upskill me and make it all better. So we'll see how she does that. And then we'll just summarize and give you the key points to take away. If you have any questions, just pop them in. Mel's going to monitor that as we go along. So we can answer those as we go along as well. So who we are, I'm Ashley. If you haven't met me, I'm the Power Platform team lead and M365 consultant at Stratos. So I work a lot in the Power Platform. It's probably my bread and butter. Probably have a little preference over Power Automate over Power Apps. So I'm glad Rich joined us so that he can take on those big Power Apps and I can continue to work on the flows. But I've been at Stratos 6 years now and done a wide range of projects through that time. I'll pass to Divya.
Thank you, Ash. For those who don't know me, I'm Divya. I've been with Stratos for over 3 years and I work on Power Platform team, mostly focusing on all the Power Platform stuffs.
Cool. So why does building a good flow matter? Basically, it allows you to have faster maintenance. So updates to flows take hours, not days. And the reason for that is when we're building good flows, we have good descriptions, good naming conventions, and everything that we're going to cover through this webinar. It allows for smooth handovers. So in our team, we're able to hand over flows between the 5 of us quite quickly because we're following these same steps every time we build a flow. So it doesn't take days to get someone up to speed with what the flow's doing. Maybe the logic sometimes does, but with the overall way that we build a flow, it's always the same. And obviously with working in Power Automate for so many years, we've reduced the runtime errors. So with what we add into our flows, we're able to create flows that have less errors. It allows for easier troubleshooting, so issues are easier to locate and fix. And then it just allows us to not rely on specific individuals, basically. So if someone in my team is sick, I'm pretty much really easy. It's really easy for me to pick up the flow and fix an issue if something comes in. So a lot of this webinar is going to be for me actually doing and then Divya actually doing. So I'm going to jump into a demo and the challenge is to see if you can identify how many issues I create in my flow. Obviously I'm building a really basic flow and it is a good flow, but there are things we could improve. So if you can identify those, that's a bonus point. So for the example that we're going to use today, we're just going to use a really simple expense approval request example. So approvals are something we do day in, day out for all different purposes, but we're just going to use an expense claim. So my business requirement is that I have an employee, we want an expense approval. So it goes to the manager to approve the expense claim. And then once it's approved, the person that has raised the expense gets an email notification. So there's 2 ways where you could start building a flow. Obviously you've got the buttons up the top here. The first one is integrate, and we can go to Power Automate and create flow. But I'm actually just going to go to make.powerautomate.com. That's just a personal preference. And I'm going to start from there. And I'm going to go to create. And I'm going to create an automated flow. So automated means it's going to automatically trigger when something happens. So I'll give it a name and I'm going to call it request approval. And I'll go through, maybe I'll check in SharePoint to see what I can do. Oh, there we go. When an item is created or modified, click create. And at the moment I've got an error. And if you haven't seen New Designer, this is the New Designer for Power Automate. A little bit different to Old Designer. I personally prefer it now, but it did take me a long time to get used to it. So I'm going to select my site address. So we've got CIU job process. And the list name is expense claims. So we'll select that. Cool, so we've got our trigger. So when an item is created or modified, this flow is going to run. So the next thing I want to do is an approval. So I'll set approval and I'll click the first one here, start and wait for approval. So the first thing I know is that renaming actions is really good. So what I'm going to do is rename this to get approval from manager. And I'll select this as approve reject, first to respond. So it's just going to be once the manager responds, it will continue in the flow. And I'm going to create a title, which I have ready here. Select claim approval. And then what I want to do is just add some dynamic content from the trigger. So I might want to pull through the title. So it's an expense claim approval for this. Now, signed to. So now I want to assign it to my manager. And in this sense, I am actually going to select myself. Wouldn't that be nice if I was actually my own manager, approved all my requests, but go Ash Lightfoot, and then I'll just copy and paste this into there. So that's the details that the manager is going to get, and then the item link. So we could actually send a link to the SharePoint item if we wanted to do that. So we've got link to item, and item link description, we might just put the title in there so that it looks nice. Now I save as I go along just so that I don't lose anything. So I'll just do a quick save there. So the flow is going to trigger when an item is created or modified, and then it's going to send an approval to the manager. So next we would want it to do some actions based on that approval. So there's an action called a condition. Add that in here. And I'll rename it. So we want to complete actions based on the approval outcome. So in here, again, for our dynamic content, we're going to say, what can we use from the Get Approval Manager to show? So we want the outcome, and we want to say if it's approved. We want to do something, and then if it's not approved, we can go down the false line. So I get that approve from here, so I know that the results are either going to be approve or reject. So I've got approve in there. And what would we want to do? So I think the first thing I'd want to do is update the item to say that it's been approved in SharePoint. So we've got an update item action here. And I'll rename, so update status of item to approve. And I'll select the site address, the list, and the ID. So we can get the ID from the trigger action. So I'll get the dynamic content, and we've got the ID there. Once we put that there, it will bring through the columns under advanced parameters. So what I want to choose here is the status value. So I want to choose that as approved because it has been approved. Now the last requirement was to send an email. So we want to send an email to the person who has requested it. And we can add the person in here. So up in this get approval for a manager, I used the actual people finder, but for this one I want to use dynamic content. So we can select the settings and select use dynamic content, and we want to use the person who created it. Created by email. And then we want a subject for the email. So your expense has been approved. And then we might just put the title on there again. And then we want some actual text. So I could put hi, and then we could get the person's name using the SharePoint column. So created by display name, your expense claim for title has been approved. And we might want to rename that as well. So notify requester outcome. Nice. So we've got the actions based on approve, but not everything gets approved. So what I might do here is if you right click on an item in New Designer, in Old Designer, if you select the 3 dots, you can get the copy, but you can copy the action and then I can paste it. But just remember, when you paste, we don't want it to say approve, we want it to say rejected, and we would want the status value to be rejected, not approved. So I can also do that with my email. Hopefully I've done everything right and it will save. Cool, no errors. So what I've just been able to whip up in a couple of minutes is a flow that's triggered when an item is created. It sends an approval to a manager, and then it updates the status of the item, and then also sends an email to the rejecter, to the person who requested it. What I'll do now is I will test what I have created. So we might want green PAL license. And we need it next week. $123. It's a software subscription. Recording videos for clients. And we can push save. So if I go back into my flow and go back, in a few moments we will see that a run pops up in here. Now for items that are automatically triggered on SharePoint, they do take 2 to 3 minutes to actually trigger, because what happens is it's calling the list every 2 to 3 minutes. So it's not instant as such, but it does happen quite quickly. And then what I'll do is I'll just quickly open my account so that we can have a look at that approval come through. Ooh, so it did trigger. And we can click in and see, so it's created the item and now it's sitting with the manager for approval. So on my screen here, just open my Outlook. There we go. So we've got the expense claim. It's got the title that we had. We can click on it, which would open the item. I had permission to that side. And we've got the description that we added in there. So I can either select approve or reject. So for this one, I'm going to push approve. And we'll see this go through its actions pretty quickly. So it's updated the item and it has also notified me of that. So if we come back in here and refresh, we've got approved. Now I'm going to pass over to Divya, and she's going to show us how to improve that.
Thank you, Ash. Let me share my screen. Hope everyone can see my screen.
Yep.
Cool. Okay. Thank you so much, Ash, for creating a simple workflow for the expense request. Okay, so now we are going to see how we can make it better. So assume that Ash is going to go on a vacation and she's going to hand over the project to me, which is actually she's doing it now. So I'm going to take over this project. And so my very first question would be, what's happening in the system, what's been built, all sorts of questions we get when we take over a project, right? So let's see how we can make it better for the next person who can manage the solution. Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna quickly get my account details. Cool. Okay, Ash did do a good job of sharing all the flows with me. So it's not tied with her account. So she did share all the flows with me, but before going on vacation. So I can, if I go into the Power Automate screen, if I go into my flows, and if I click on shared with me, I can see request approval. Let me see what's happening with it. Oh, interesting. There are two run histories. I did see Ash did create one request, maybe, but there is another run history as well. But when I look at the claims in the list, there aren't any new claims at all. So I want to figure out why there is another run history and why it is pending with the manager. So that's the issue I have now, and I'm going to troubleshoot why it's happening. But before, as soon as I saw the flow, the very first thing got me is the title of the flow, request approval. But for what? So if I'm going to go into the Power Automate and if I'm going to see all the flows with me, have no idea what this is for, what process is this for, or yeah, what is this for? So we need more details. So what we would advise is always have a title so that the users would be able to read it as soon as they see the flow, what it does and what the process is for. So the general practice is having a prefix with the business process. In this case, it is expense clients, and having the words like what it does, whether it's an approval or whether it's a review or whatever it is. So that's the first thing I'm gonna fix. Cool, I've saved it. Okay, and the second one is it would have helped me if I have a description of the flow, what it actually does, rather than me going to the edit mode and viewing all the actions to see what it's actually doing. So Power Automate gives us a tab called description. I feel like even when I started, I never used it at all, but I didn't know its value until until I look at my flows after a couple of years. What was I doing? So it is always good to put a small description. It could be a simple description saying that when a new request gets submitted, it sends an approval task. It matters a lot for a new person when looking at this description rather than going and troubleshooting what's really happening. So let me just put in a description. I didn't want to type over the webinar, so I did copy paste everything. Cool. So it just appears nice in here. If I refresh the screen, it gives us basic description on what it does. So that is cool. Okay, so for me, as a support person, for me, the next question is, does this process have any other requests, like notifying the payroll team after it's been approved, or notifying any other stakeholders or anyone in the organization about it? So how do I know if there is any other process involved for this particular business process? So how do I know that? The simple answer would be a good documentation or documenting the business process somewhere in the tenant. But we do good, most of them do good documentation when we do on a project, but when we upgrade it or when we do an enhancement, we often tend to miss it. So I would say, to put it in simple, group everything into a solution. so that everything gets packed in one package. And whoever have access to the solution, they would be able to see pretty much everything that's involved with the business process. So I did manage to create a solution while Ash was creating the flows for us. So what it does is it's pretty much solution. So if I go into the Power Automate screen, oh sorry. So there is a tab called Solution. You might have come across this. So what it is it's just a package of things where you can group all the Power Platform components. And with using the solutions, we have so many features available with the flows and Power Apps and everything. So which I'll go through as I go. And in here, we can add the existing flows as well, even though we don't want to process have a ALM process, application lifecycle management, which is having a dev and production. We can just group everything into a solution. So it makes so much easier for someone who gets on board into the project. They can have a look at this and they can know what's involved in this business process rather than reading the whole documentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to include the new flow which Ash created. So I'm just going to click on add existing, and I know it's an automation and I know it's a cloud flow. And it just pretty much gives me, as I have full level of access in this environment, it gives pretty much everything in our demo environment. So I'm just going to click on outside Dataverse because it's not a Dataverse flow. I'm just going to find it. Oh, here it is. Cool. I think I did get a wrong flow because it says expense clients, but if it's not expense client, it always happens with the demo. Just a second.
You've just missed the S of expense.
Oh, yeah.
In the flow.
Okay, let me try again. Access, cloud flow.
Remove the S.
Yeah. Oh, cool. Cool. Okay, so this is the flow which was modified 3 minutes ago. So I'm just going to add it. So having a flow and a solution. So the benefits of having a flow and solution is it offers version history, and you can restore the previous version as well. So currently, if we have a flow outside the solution, we don't have version histories at all. We'll have to manually back up every time and store it in a place, and we have to keep it up to date. But having it as a solution flow, it gives you the version history, and you can restore the previous versions as well. But it's all available in new designer, not in the old designer. So as you can see in here, the version histories are available in here. As I edit it, after I have added it to the solution, we might see all the version histories listed here. Cool. Okay, so coming back to the issue. So the issue we had is why there is 2 run histories. That's the issue we had, right? So I'm just going to find what's happening with it. This is the right one. Yeah, so I'm going to find what's happening with it, and I'm going to confirm. Yep, it looks like both the run histories for the same ID. So I'm going to have a look at the old run history to see what's happening. And I'm going to edit that tab, edit the flow as well. So it looks like first time the manager has approved and it has gone through the approve actions and it has updated back in SharePoint. So the trigger of the flow is on modification as well. So which means even though the manager has approved it, which means the SharePoint list item got modified and that triggered another run history. So we don't want an item to be on approval again after it's been approved, right? So we are going to fix it. So the easiest to fix would be adding a trigger condition in here, saying that if it's an approved, don't trigger it. But in our business, in this business case, the users want the ability to trigger the workflow when they want it to send for approval, rather than just triggering it on every creation or modification. So what we are going to do is we are going to replace this trigger from an automated trigger to a manual trigger. But before I do that, I'm just going to have a quick look at it just to make sure everything is there. Yep. Cool. Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and delete the trigger. Cool. And I'm going to add a new trigger called for selected item, which is a manual trigger, which means the user would have an ability to trigger the workflow when they are ready to do it. So the next benefit of having a flow in a solution is we can use environment variables, which I'll show now. So environment variables are, so previously when Ash did create the flow, she was just selecting the site address and the details from the drop down. But instead of doing it in here, we can use the environment variables, which is pretty much a place where it shows all the site values and test values for us. And if we want to change it, we can change it on the environment variable at one place, and it just reflects back in all places like Power Apps, Power Automate, any Power Platform components, rather than us going through each step and updating it manually. I would say many would have come across this while you were in development phase and moving to the prod phase, because I was doing exactly the same when I started at Stratos. I used to go into each action and replacing with the prod environment variables. So environment variable saves lots of time for us. So all we have to do is, when I created the solution, so there is a tab called environment variables. We'll just have to create new environment variable in here. Just give it a nice display name so that it would be easier for you to understand and maintain long term as well. And this is not just bound to this solution. This environment variable can go across the whole environment. So it is always good to have a good naming convention so that it can be reused multiple times. So I have already created environment variables. So as you can see, I have the site variable created in here and the list variable as well. Cool. So I'm just going to use this. So this is the site variable which I created. And if I click on list name, this is the one which I created. Cool. Okay. Now I've changed my trigger. I'm just going to click on save. Okay. Now I get so many errors in here saying that the parameters. Oh, okay. So these actions missing some parameters. Let's go and find what's happening. Oh, it's missing the ID. It is because so Ash would use all the parameters from the trigger. And after I remove the trigger, it just removes all the dynamic content. So when I removed it, it didn't warn me saying that I'm going to lose all the details from the flow. So what I'll have to do is, the best practice is always use a get item or get table row if you're using a Dataverse as a data source. So it is always good practice to have a get item action after the trigger and use its dynamic parameters across the flow. So even if in future, if we want to change the trigger or if we want to change anything about the trigger, it would be the one place where we need to update it, not the entire workflow. As it's a simple workflow, it's going to take me only 5 minutes, but it's going to be a big workflow, then it might take ages for me to figure out. Cool. I'm just going to go ahead with the same setup of having the environment variables. And I'm going to pass in the trigger ID. And I'm going to cool. Okay. Okay. Before I update in here, I'm just going to I'm going to have a look at the next step, which is get approval from manager. I can see that I did rename it, which is good because it clearly says that it's going to get approval from manager. But the issue I have is I don't know what action has been used, because when I search for approvals, we can see that there are so many actions that relates to the approvals. So I have no idea which approval action has been used. So we all know that Microsoft likes to decommission few actions after few letters. So this it is always good practice when we use a when we use a action. It is always good practice to leave the action name as a prefix, and then followed by a small note saying that what it actually does. It gives us a clear idea what the action is, and in 5 years later, if I'm going to have a look at it, I know what the action has been used, other than me finding the screenshots and playing around with everything. Cool. Okay, so let's see what she has done here. Get approval for manager. I know I did see her. I did see her creating the workflow, so I know it's a start and wait approval. So it's a personal preference. So I prefer create an approval over start and wait approval because it's just it gives an ability to post it back in SharePoint or the data source saying that, post it back to the data source saying that the request is pending for approval, or it just posted back with few more details rather than it being get stuck, because we know we all would take ages to approve a request, and the requester would have no idea who the approver is or where the request is. So I personally prefer using a create an approval over start and wait approval, but it's just a personal preference and it depends on the business process, I would say. So I'm just gonna go ahead with Ash actions because I don't want to spend much time. Okay, so I'm just gonna put in all the details that is missing. Okay, so it hasn't clearly picked everything yet. Okay, I'm just expecting this get item dynamic properties to pop out, but it isn't popping for some reason. So I'll just have to save it. Oh. Okay, I'm just gonna hard code it for now because I want to save this workflow before I do anything. Cool. Cool. Okay, so it needs a save to bring up all the details. So as I said, instead of using the trigger of the dynamic content from the trigger, it's always best practice to use the get item one. So I'm just going to replace with everything, and item link would be link to item, and this would be title. I'm just going to copy paste the details as well, and I'm not going to disturb anything. And in update an item, I'm going to pass the get item ID details. And same in here as well. And it would be an email to the requester who is created by email. I'm going to copy paste as I go. Code has been approved, and this has removed the title. Cool. I hope I have updated I have replaced all the trigger dynamic content with get item content. Cool. Okay, no error. That's nice. Okay, so if I go back in here and I'm going to create a new item, so I'm going to say it's Miro license. And it's for next week. It's gonna expire next week. Software subscription. Yep. And I'm gonna save it. And so there are a few ways. So as I said, we did change the trigger from an automated trigger to an instant trigger, which means the user get to choose when they want to trigger for the approval request. So all they have to do, there are a few ways we can do it. One is using a JSON button and SharePoint, where they would be just clicking on it and it would pop like this to trigger the workflow. So this is another workflow which I created before the demo. But now for the one which I created now, so all I have to do is click on three thoughts, automate, flow, and that should pop in here. One without yes. And as is the first time, it just checks all my connection has been valid. And if I click on continue, and if I click on run flow, and if I go back in here, cool. So this is the new one which did trigger. That's nice. And Ash would have got a approval request. Cool. Okay. So okay. So this is how. So it's just taking the so when Ash did create it, it was an automated trigger, and now the people get to choose everything. So what I did is I didn't want to spend a lot of time in the webinar showing all the individual actions. So what I did is I did create a copy of it on what are the things that I could have included in this current workflow to take it to the next level. The one thing is approval history. So clearly posting back to the SharePoint about when the approval has been started, how long it took, and who was the approver and who approved it. Sometimes we do create approval task for a group of people, and one might have approved it. So the requesters might, it would be nice to have a visibility of who approved it. So it's just posting back to it. So what I do in here is just I create a variable called var approval history, and I keep updating it in the flow and post it back in the SharePoint, which is a good way of having the transparency to the users. And the other thing which we would recommend is using Get Manager connection, because for now it's all hard coded to Ash, but obviously in real time that wouldn't be the case. So we can either manage it in a SharePoint list, or we can get it from the Mantra as well. So it pretty much, the Azure has to be up to date with the user, with all the manager details. And as I said, I personally like using a create an approval. After we create an approval, what I do is I update back in SharePoint saying that it's approval in progress, and I do append who is it spending with, when was it started, and who was the approver, and all those details. So I can show you an example. I click on it. So this is the one which I revised yesterday. So as you can see here, it gives me clear information on when it was started and who started it and who's the current approver, all those details. So it's just making a small step, but the users would really like to see where their request is at. And yeah, and pretty much having a flat workflow rather than having so many apply to each conditions or the other, or do until, or all those conditions. So it's just a small things we can include in the flow that makes so much better in future for the users and everything.
I have a question, Divya.
Yeah.
Jean would like to know, if you had used an automated trigger, would it be possible to create a condition in the trigger to exclude changes to the approval value?
Yes, we can do it. Yes, we can do it. So we can have a trigger condition in the trigger saying that do not trigger if it's been approved or if it's been rejected. But again, if it's a new, I assume that if it's a new request, and if I'm going to edit it after I create a new request, for the request, as per requester, it is not ready for approval. So it triggers a workflow for every modification. So there might be multiple run histories for the same request.
Yeah, I think you just get a bit more control with for a selected item or a manual trigger. Automated works well, but we do see it in times where people just make a spelling mistake or something like that, and it actually triggers to approvals. Because we're only filtering out a couple of we're only filtering out when it is approved or rejected, not the start one. So if they change it quite quickly or change it before it's approved, it will trigger more than one approval.
Yeah. And the last but not least, having flow file notifications. Obviously, Power Automate does send a monthly report saying that flow has been filed, but it is always out of sync and it's not accurate with the dates. So it is always good to include send an email action or something like that when a flow fails to the that logs a support ticket to the IT support team so they can have a look at it. So just I'm going to quickly show this version history. No, it's not enabled in this as well. Because cool. Okay, so that's my
Nice.
demo. Any other questions?
Give a couple of minutes just in case anyone's got anything else they want to add to the chat in terms of questions.
Yeah, and I'll go over a summary. So obviously what we showed is what we've learned over 6 years, or me 6 years, but Divya 3. So there's a lot in there, and we have gone through it quite quickly. But I guess the main things just to be aware of is use naming convention. That is really important. Keep the action title so that you know what the actual action is. A lot of the SharePoint ones look the same and ask for the same input, so it is really important just to name it appropriately. Use solutions. I was very scared of solutions for many years, but now that I've used them, I wouldn't go back. It's so good for development and production purposes, and just the ease of updating environment variables in one place rather than multiple places in the flow. Use the get actions after triggers. Really important, as Divya showed, if you delete the trigger, it removed every single dynamic variable that I used within the flow. So if you use that get action right from the word go, even no matter what else you change, you can use that get actions. Another tip on the get actions is just to probably use one after the approval in case the approver changes some of the information before they approve it, so that you're still getting up-to-date information. Monitor your flows and handle failures. So as Divya said, the flow fails, the service account or the account that creates the flow will get a notification to say that it has failed, but it's not timely, and that account is often not really managed. So by adding a flow failure, you're getting instant notification. So something like health and safety, that's really important that you get notified straight away. Use a service account so that people don't own their flows. So we see a lot of people creating flows with their personal accounts and then leaving the organization, which then leave orphaned flows. Export backups. So we didn't quite get to showing that, but you can export your flow as a backup, which just is a zip folder. Even with solutions, we still export backups now because we've had a scenario where the whole environment was deleted because it wasn't being active, which deleted everything. So we're really lucky that we had backups of our flows. Add flow descriptions, as Divya showed. Minimize loops and nested conditions. So we try and use variables and things to keep our flows really flat structured, because you can start by adding some conditions, but then it gets to a case where it's like, okay, I want to add another condition and then another condition, which makes flows really messy. And then the other last tip I've got here is document your flow. So there is a software called Power Docu, and I did open it while Divya was showing her example. Is it going to open? No. For some reason it's not opening. I can send that out with the link. It's called Power Docu, but basically if you export your flow from Power Automate, you can upload the zip package into Power Docu and it will document the flow for you. It doesn't do the logic of what's actually happening, but it does do all the actions and variables and connections and things like that, which are handy to keep on track. Cool. So I guess what we've shown today, it's not really about the technical skills, it's just about those little things that you can do to help other people understand what you're doing, and then to make flows really easy to manage and less errors and notified at the right time, etc. So hopefully you learned something, and if you have any questions, you've got Mel's details there, or you can put them into the chat.
Jamie just said that one rare scenario he's found for favouring start and wait approval actions over individual start and wait actions is that sometimes a user can approve or reject an approval quickly before the workflow gets to the wait action, causing an error and making it fail. So using that combined action eliminates the issue.
Yeah, it does. I guess from my perspective, the create, you can see a lot more, which is where we would use it, because we get asked who it's been sent to a lot, and with that start and wait for approval, it's hard to know who it's waiting on sometimes. But yeah, they both do have pros and cons, unfortunately, with most of the actions.
Are there any other considerations when moving an existing Power Automate into a solution? Keen to take advantage of some of the version history on some that's already been set up.
Yeah. The hardest thing moving flows into solutions, and we've done it quite a few times, is updating everything. So obviously it's all hard coded when you've got it in my flows. So the main thing is setting up your environment variables to change it into there. For some reason, Microsoft is releasing a lot of updates to solution flows rather than just my flows, like the version history, but it's there are quite a few things that are coming in there, so I would highly recommend putting them into solutions. And you can still put them in solutions in the default environment as well. Obviously you're not going to export them and import them into another environment, but you can still make use of the solutions in the default environment.
Okay, so in some scenarios, the flow might not get triggered at all. In such cases, how can we identify if there's an issue with the workflow?
Oh, good question. I think there's quite a few reasons as to why that could be. If it's an automated flow with SharePoint, we could probably use versioning to figure it out. We do see it every now and then, because obviously when you're using automated with SharePoint, it goes and checks every 3 to 4 minutes. It's not instant. And I know with one client we experienced they weren't triggering, and it was due to the timing of the check. But we were able to use version history to see what was happening. I don't know if people have seen this, which I'll quickly just put up on my screen just for those that don't trigger. There is, let me just share. If you go into your flow and into the all runs, up here there's a little toggle. So normally you only see the running, succeeded or failed, but there's also failed checks and checks no data, which often give you more information about why it has failed to check. So obviously mine won't have any because we've only just created it, but there is normally some good information in there as well if it is failing to trigger.
Is there a way to get notified if the flow doesn't trigger at all?
The service account will probably be triggered to say there is an issue with the trigger. The other thing they do is put a notification across the top here to say that your trigger is not working, and check the flow monitoring system, which is in here. So normally you'll have an issue showing in the flow checker to say that there is an issue with the trigger, but no email notification. We could probably actually have a look at that, Divya, see if there is a way that we can get into that information. It will also turn off after a period of time. If there is an issue with the trigger, it will turn itself off.
I don't think I've got any more questions at this stage, but if you do, you can always reach out to us, and the team are happy to help. But thanks for coming along today. Hope you learnt some things, and I'll let you know if I manage to build a flow.